Welcome to College of Circles. I'm Jeff, and today I'll be reviewing Pathfinder's Fists of the Ruby Phoenix bundle set. In part one, I'll go over the box set's Martial Arts Masters and Contenders of Champions, as well as the premium figure Syndara Final Form. In part two, I'll review the box set's Danger Island Denizens and Tournaments of Trials, and I'll also give my final thoughts on the entire line. Now, all of these sets were first released individually in July of 2023, and they're now available as a bundle through WizKids and Amazon. As always, my criteria for figures is a 10-point scale. By default, figures will get 1 point in each of 5 categories. Those categories are the details in the sculpt, details in the paint, the overall pose, the figure's versatility, and how much the figures inspire me to use them in my gaming. If a figure excels, I'll give it 2 points. And if it's below average, I'll give it a 0 point in each category. Now, although you can flavor text a figure to be anything you want it to be, I'll be rating them as if what my players see in the figure is exactly what the characters are seeing in the game. I play Dungeons and Dragons, so I look at figures from Pathfinder and Critical Role as if I were using them in one of my games. So with that being said, here's the figures. All right, first up, we're going to take a look at the Martial Arts Masters. This set consists of 7 figures and originally listed for an MSRP, manufacturer suggested retail price of $79.99. Like I said, there's 7 figures in this lineup. All right, so first up, we have Jin Hei. Now, this figure, what I like about this figure is the actual sculpt. This is a pretty cool sculpt, and specifically the pose in it is really cool. Unfortunately, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here. Now, in most of my other previous videos, I've talked about how much I don't like these transparent, translucent figures, and I just want to take a minute to kind of explain why that is. So in this Jin Hei figure, there's a lot of really cool details in the sculpt. There's something going on the ground, some kind of a wave or force or some kind of radiant energy coming out. If you look really close, there is some nice detail in the face on the sculpt and in the hair. Unfortunately, because this is just one solid piece of monochrome transparent plastic, all those details get lost. So it just looks generic and just like a blob of plastic. Now, there are ways to do these type of figures, these type of ghost or invisible figures, where you don't lose all that detail. And it really doesn't take much. Just a little bit of darkening in the shadows, a little bit added paint, just touching up the face a little bit. Using a little bit of different colored plastic throughout the piece. There's a lot of ways to do it so that those details don't get lost. And you see this in a lot of the common figures throughout the Pathfinder battles or Icons of the Realms lineups. So when I see these figures that is just illegible hunk of plastic, I just don't feel like the effort was put in, and I don't feel like I'm getting my money's worth, especially on a premium set like this. As these kind of figures goes, this is one of the better ones, mainly because of the pose, but I really wish those details were a little more legible. All right, moving on, we have next up is, and I might be mispronouncing some of the names in these lineups, but this is Zoto Sakara, excuse me. And this is a Onidoshi sorcerer. Now, this figure I used almost immediately. We've never had a true pre-painted Oni figure. And now we do, thanks to Pathfinder. So I used this figure in a game almost immediately after getting it. It was fun. Although I realized Onis need backup. They can be quite weak on their own, especially if you hid their weapon and armor so that they could take a shapeshift form. Anyways, that's a side note. But so this figure, inspiration, like I said, I used it immediately. This is a figure that I almost was an inspiration to do another video about figures we need from WizKids. And then lo and behold, I picked this one up. So solid figure, slightly above average. It doesn't have a lot of detail in the face or paint, but there is enough detail there that this can get an above average mark for me. All right, moving on with the martial arts masters, we got Raisho Postulant Yeti Monk. And this is, for a large figure, there is not a lot of detail in this. And the detail that's there is kind of hard to read. And there's some. This is, I would rate this kind of an average figure. The one thing I like about this is the pose. This is a pretty dynamic pose. I love that cape flowing up behind him. And, the way his arms are. Again, he looks like he just jumped off some cliff or a ledge, and he is ready for battle. Really, really cool storytelling in the pose there. But otherwise, an average figure, and one that it's, especially in Dungeons and Dragons, it would be hard to use as anything other than an occasional NPC. So moving on to the fourth figure in the martial arts masters, we have Siu Tak Noir, white-haired witch. And this is another figure that's kind of cool. A little bit above average. What I really like about this figure is there is some cool details in the sculpt. It's got a little butterfly on her arm. The hair is loose, so it's a little bit flexible. So this is a pretty cool figure. I could see using this as an NPC, and I can even see some of my players wanting to use this in a game as a monk or a druid or a rogue. She has a pretty cool looking figure. So again, slightly above average on this figure here. Next up, we have the Takatora Daitengu form. And this is really, there's some interesting things in here. There seems to be a lot of Kenku figures in the Pathfinder lineup, or maybe I just end up picking them up. But the one thing I don't like about this figure is in the sculpt, his weapons here are really kind of obscuring his face. I think that's just kind of bad placement. Other than that, it's a really average, perfectly average figure. Solid. If you ever want to have a Kenku monk, this would be the figure to go grab, or maybe even a Kenku fighter, but most likely a Kenku monk. This would be the figure to get. Now we have the sixth figure of the martial arts masters, and this is Tomikon Kangomoto Predator. And this is one of the ugliest figures I can think of. And this might just be a personal preference, and I know this comes from the original artwork from Paizo, but this nose just looks ridiculous. The snout of this creature, I can't take that seriously, and I couldn't put this as a monster in front of my players and have them take it seriously. I would use this as almost a joke character. So I don't know how much of a predator it is. And this is an obscure reference, but when I look at this, I think of Orko from Master of the Universe or Snarf from Thundercats. This doesn't inspire fear in me, or it looks too much like a joke character. The last figure in the Martial Arts Master set, and if this was a joke, it's a bad joke. A lot of times with these figures, but not all the time, the people at WizKids kind of get stuck with whatever the artwork is. So a lot of these figures are taken directly from the artwork from the original books. I could not find the original artwork for the Yarika biting nose, but I'm assuming that's the case. This is a poorly attired figure. She looks like a Halloween costume for Sexy Grand Dragon. It's a hot mess. Somebody should have thought of this before it ever made it to print. Overall, the Martial Arts Masters, there's a couple really good pieces here, but nothing too spectacular. And there's a couple of really weak, odd choices in this lineup. So I believe this MSRP for this set was $79.99 for 7 figures. So a little over $7 or a little over $10 a figure. I'm just not seeing the quality on that, but I will talk more about that in part 2. All right, in the second box set from the Fist of the Ruby Phoenix, we have Contenders and Champions. This consists of 6 figures. So the first figure here, we have the Ghost Eater Monk. This is a pretty cool figure. Really like the pose, really like the sculpt in this. Again, really like how the clothing kind of matches what its action is. This is really nitpicky and not enough to really mark this down, but the color choice for the skin just kind of bothers me. It reminds me too much of the Incredible Hulk and not the more of a darker tone that we usually see with orcs. But and that's super nitpicky. Overall, this is a really cool figure. If you want to play an orc monk, this would be the absolute first figure to go to. All right, second figure in this lineup is Halsping the Stung. And this is it's a decent figure. The biggest issue I have with it is how blank the face looks. The face is probably the most important thing to get details on, because that's what really kind of brings a figure to life. And it's what really separates these premium WizKids figures from the more generic stuff. This is a premium figure, but that face looks pretty muddy. Overall, though, I do like the pose. I like the versatility of this. I'm always fond of having NPC figures. Every tavern needs a band. Musicians are always a nice touch. All right, the next figure in the Contenders and Champions is probably my favorite in this entire lineup. Now, this is what I expect to see from a premium figure. This is Hao Jin, Ruby Phoenix Sorcerer. So what do I like about this? One, this is a super versatile figure. There's a lot of creativity here. And with the wings and the fire, she could be multiple classes: Sorcerer, Druid, Warlock. She could be a Tiefling. She could be a Fairy. You can see, even from a distance, you can see that the face is painted. Now, this particular figure comes right off of the cover artwork on one of the Fist of the Ruby Phoenix books. So the original artist probably put more attention to detail on this, but it definitely comes through in the figure. Beautiful figure. I don't really have anything bad to say about it. So, beautiful. So next up, we have the Haldren Skullstitter. And everything I said about the Hao Jin figure is kind of the opposite here. The face, although you can see that the face was painted, from a distance, it just looks muddy, and as does the hair. The pose itself is decent. This is just a very average figure. And the weapon, common problem with WizKids miniatures, this weapon is really soft and bendy. I'd rather have that than brittle plastic, but it's just something to keep in mind. All right, next up we have Aurori, God of Perfection, and another really solid figure in this lineup. We don't get a lot of really good monk figures, and this is one of the most monks that's ever monked. This is about, I want to say it's perfection, but it is pretty close. There's just enough detail in the face that you can see that it was painted. And the pose is solid. I do like that they put this riser on the leg. That's a very good breaking point, but they took care of that pretty well here. The only thing I would have liked to have seen is I would have preferred to have that riser on the back of the leg attached at the heel rather than covering up the entire foot. But otherwise, this is a pretty solid figure. All right, the last figure for Contenders and Champions is Syndara the Sculptor. Now, there's some pretty cool aspects of this and some pretty weak aspects of it. So the face is just really poorly painted and looks kind of silly. But other than that, the pose is really cool. I think does a really good job of telling a story. Although it might not be the most versatile figure because of that pose, it does make me want to incorporate this figure and tell his story. So I like that whatever he's conjuring, it almost looks like he's conjuring a portal to somewhere. I think that's pretty cool. And yeah, overall, just a little neat. The back leg seems to be curved unnaturally. That's kind of weird, but anyways, pretty solid figure. And overall, this set is probably the best out of the Fist of the Ruby Phoenix because of these there's one exceptional figure and a couple other ones that are really solid. And nothing in this lineup that I would consider bad. So yeah, overall pretty good set. Just retailed for $59.99. It's probably the only set in this lineup that I think justifies that price. We have the premium figure from this set, which is Syndara the Sculptor Final Form. Now, a quick little funny story. I actually had a gift card to my local game store, and I actually bought this figure right before I ordered the bundle set. So I did end up paying full price for this figure. And on the outside, this figure looks really cool. When you're just looking at it front on, really cool. As soon as you turn it to the side, though, I feel like I'm playing an unmodded Skyrim, and all the meshes are two-dimensional. I don't know where the rest of its body went. It's got no back at all. From the front, it's a really cool, beautiful figure, and I actually did pay full price for this. MSRP was $44.99. If I had actually seen the entire figure, I don't think I would have bought it, but I'm not too upset that I did. All right, so that was, this is part 1 of the Fist of the Ruby Phoenix lineup. And in part 2, I will be going over the rest of the figures, the other 2 box sets, and my final thoughts. So with that being said, once again, I'm Jeff. Thank you for watching this episode of College of Circles. If you like this content and want to see more, you know what to do. Hit those like and subscribe buttons, share, and leave a comment below. Was I too harsh on some of these figures? Let me know.